we are more than happy to have a Roaring Twenties forum organized in challenging and critical times. September 2021, as we struggle actually to leave behind the quarantine period, as we struggle with the new with Delta variation. We're trying to send a strong message that we are here, we are strong, and we will fight and we will overcome this challenge. Why we have selected Roaring Twenties? I think that it cannot better described rather than the poster created from Mrs. Mariana Tanaya, Communication Director of DCN Global, which represents the similarities between the two decades. Our poster shows a lady in her typewriter in the 90s, 20s, and shows a young lady on 2020 in front of her computer. That's the main similarity. What we are trying to avoid, though, is to learn the lessons from the past, not to allow extremism, not to allow hate speech, not to allow disinformation to prevail. This is why we have chosen these topics, because the challenge now, in order to avoid mistakes of the past, is how to rebuild trust, how to regain, to restore truth, and how actually to promote influence. These elements are critical in order actually to address the current challenges.
The situation we are in now is not really new. 100 years ago with Spanish flu, the world was in a very similar predicament. So somehow we lost the lessons of that time, and we see repeat of conspiracy theories, mistrust, and also misinformation and even disinformation, sometimes by authorities. So I would say that the way forward is to build a trust in the system, and you do it only by development of a civil society with all its checks and balances. Only then people can really trust authorities, trust the system, or rather trust themselves through those authorities that they can relate to.
This particular forum has been really interesting because we are reflecting obviously on the past, where we've been, the same things that happened in the 1920s where we're just recovering from a pandemic. I think that was the Spanish flu, if I'm wrong or right, and we were working on that, and we're now recovering, and we had that exuberance that came post-pandemic. And so we're starting to see the same sort of thing happening in 2020. But the thing that makes it really different is that we're looking at it through a digital lens, as digital and technology as a catalyst.
Trust in the information, the online information environment is very different, and with the plethora of sources of information and news, the plethora of platforms, folks don't know the difference between different news outlets, and they end up relying on brands first to really try to assess the credibility of information. So having a strong brand in this information environment is key. Protecting that brand is absolutely essential, and that means that anyone who's associated with that brand has to be completely synced with the idea of editorial excellence, 100% accuracy, and a commitment to their audiences.
As media becomes more personal and adaptable, trust is becoming a serious issue. And the definition between true or false is not the job of a machine to solve it, but it can significantly assist combined with people's professionalism. So we live in a world that the distinction between physical and digital is slowly disappeared. So in the near future, our world will be the media.
Certainly China's been a really important player in the whole corona pandemic, obviously. It started in China. The way that China has dealt with it both domestically and internationally has had a great impact around the world. Obviously a lot of controversy associated with that. But now in the wake of the a year and a half later or so, there's a lot of efforts on China's part to be seen to be playing a constructive role in combating the virus with health diplomacy, but also potentially in rebuilding societies. None of that is necessarily going to go smoothly, and that'll be part of what I talk about in my presentation.
The major factor that I would say this year that's different is that the whole world is dealing with the same types of mis and disinformation. In past years, it's maybe in America, it's about American politics. In a different country, it would be about something else. I think what I saw this year, which is really interesting, is that the same types of claims about wearing a mask, the COVID vaccine, the virus itself, they were ubiquitous. They were the same as in Brazil and the US and Greece and Spain and wherever else. And so I think that's interesting because it shows you how misinformation can spread. It also shows you how maybe fact checkers and fact checking groups like PolitiFact can work together to kind of help debunk misinformation for a global audience.
So how COVID disinformation is different from other conspiracy disinformation topics that we've seen before? It really works with trust, and it exploits science and medicine, which is not available as a knowledge for all the people. Doctors, they need to learn for a long time. Scientists spend their whole life seeking the truth in molecules in a completely different universe. And for regular people, all they can do, they can trust science, they can trust medical doctors. COVID-19 disinformation works on undermining trust in specialists, experts, and giving additional floor to those who are in exile from the scientific community for reasons. And I think this is really a call for science communication.
We discussed about the importance of communicating between borders and try to understand and see the patterns of disinformation which is happening right now all over the world. And also we discussed about our findings during the last 1 year and a half on this topic, on working on this project with teams from Romania, Georgia, Greece and Italy.
I make a call for all of you to come and join Fake News Hunters, because what is done digitally in the digital world is affecting our lives, our real world. And have that in mind. Come with us to fight disinformation, find some fake news, and we will wait for you.
Honored to be a part of the Combating Disinformation training course and to meet wonderful people there and to have the opportunity to learn from the significant expert with significant experience about how we can combating disinformation in this world of sea of information. The networking was the most important thing, so we will connect it with the people around the world that's actively working in this field. Together we create an idea, and now with support of DCN we can turn this idea into reality.
So this has been a very rewarding experience because I knew some of the participants already, but it's always nice to put a face to the names, and exchanging the projects that everyone is doing is also fostering possibilities of new projects and cooperation. So I think this has been very fruitful.
What we've learned from this particular forum is that indeed there are many similarities from what happened in 1920, but most importantly, I think our recovery is going to be remarkably different because we've got technologies like artificial intelligence, we've got big data, we've got issues around just how technology has built new communities and the way we share information and disinformation. So I think we're going to have a very different climate, as well as how the internet has affected even just our economics through cryptocurrency and digital finances.
Well, the future of finance is going to be defined, I think, by the combination of the new technologies that are emerging, including the ability to create digital currencies, 5G, AI, and all the rest of the technologies that we know that are affecting this space. And in combination with what the regulators decide to do with these innovations, because the regulators can, there's a whole, I'd say range of what they can do. They can stifle innovation, or they can go with the innovation, but they still need to keep keep track of what would be best for the end user, right? For the small person that is using the financial systems. And I guess it also has to do with what people are going to be doing, because if people decide to be voting with their behavior that they prefer this kind of service or that kind of service, I guess the rest of the world will just follow, right? So what the future of finance is, I think that's the accumulation of the players playing together and who pulls and pushes in which direction and I guess wins in this, can I call it the game of coins?
Well, from my perspective, games, which are the fastest growing form of media today, it's got a huge following and it's growing very quickly in all regions of the world. Obviously, a medium that has that kind of growth and strength has a lot of content, and there's a lot of people viewing that content, especially younger people who are very impressionable, and they pick up on ideas from all kinds of sources in their environment. Well, if they're playing games so much, then the content that is in games, the ideas represented, representation of culture, politics, geopolitics, all of these different things, even if it's a fantasy game where a lot of times in a fantasy game, for example, we will use allegory, a real world allegory, to talk about a real conflict, but we put it in a fantasy setting so it's not as sensitive. But a lot of players may not understand that allegory. They may not understand the history on which it's based. The representation of characters also from a cultural perspective, ethnic perspective, gender. There's a lot of influences in this space. And so I think in gaming today, we have to be even more vigilant and to be more thoughtful about what we're putting into these games, because so many people are seeing them and it's just going to increase more and more. And so I think we really have to take these issues seriously, even in the gaming space, which people say, well, it's just for fun. It is for fun, but it's also a hugely influential medium, and that's why we have to take this very seriously.
So something that we were really surprised to find was when looking at these far-right groups on the dark web that alongside the hate speech, alongside the misinformation that they were sharing, where coronavirus misinformation, vaccine misinformation was also part of what we found. We were really struck by the community building efforts that were happening on there as well, with people sharing self-help resources, physical wellness, tips and advice, the mention of a book club even, and that's been really exciting to be here to talk to people who professionally work on building healthy groups and communities across large social media platforms. So really excited to be here. Thank you.
I think that the rise of communities has just started, where communities have become more and more important, online, virtual, but also offline. They've always been important. But we see now with what I talked about, from social media to the metaverse, that everything accelerates, everything blends in. There's coming together of the physical space, the virtual space, and augmented reality. And when that all comes together, it's even wider and limitless. So I think it's very important that we focus on kind of how we build communities, how we build public spaces for people to come together in those fields.
The worst thing that can happen is that we repeat the mistakes that were made 100 years ago, and we know that at that time, after 1920s and 30s, the world descended into horrible war. We are not there yet, so we still have time to learn from the past mistakes and choose a different way. And so I believe that meetings, conferences, exchanges like this one support this end.
I think from COVID and this whole experience has taught us that it's not over yet. Yes, it's been very devastating what COVID-19 has done across the world, but I don't think it's over yet. And I think only great things are to come. And I'll be optimistic and say I don't think we're going to have a Great Depression. If anything, we might have a very huge shift in the way that people relate to each other. So maybe we might have a lot of political differences that will rock the world a bit, but overall I see nothing but a good forecast.
We are very thankful to everyone that contributed to that, to our vibrant community, to our speakers that came across in order to participate and send this strong message. But above all, State Department, Citizens Exchanges and Educational Office, the U.S. Consulate in Thessaloniki, U.S. Embassy in Greece, and above all, World Learning that supports the work of DCN. Lastly, I would like to thank all the volunteers, all the people that worked in order actually to have this very successful event.